Marcus Chin's eyes snapped open to the sight of gleaming metal walls and the soft hum of advanced technology. His head pounded like someone had used it for target practice, and his mouth tasted like he'd been chewing on copper wiring for a week. The last thing he remembered was working late at the observatory, tracking that strange signal from deep space. Now he was lying on what felt like the world's most comfortable medical bed, staring at a ceiling that definitely wasn't made on Earth. He tried to sit up, but his muscles felt like overcooked pasta. The room around him was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The walls curved seamlessly into the ceiling, covered in panels that pulsed with soft blue light. Strange symbols scrolled across transparent screens that hung in midair, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with some kind of energy field. "You're awake," a voice said from somewhere above him. Marcus turned his head, searching for the source. A figure stepped out of what he could have sworn was solid wall just seconds before. She was tall, maybe 6 feet, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Her hair was white as fresh snow, flowing down her back like liquid starlight. But it was her eyes that caught his attention. They were completely black, like looking into the depths of space itself. "Where am I?" Marcus managed to croak out, his voice rough from disuse. "You are aboard the research vessel Asteria," she replied, her voice carrying an odd musical quality. "I am Dr. Zara of the Alterian Science Collective. You have been unconscious for 72 of your Earth hours." Marcus tried to process this information. Aliens. Real aliens. And he was apparently their guest, or maybe their prisoner. "How did I get here?" "The last thing I remember was at the observatory." "You were selected," Zara said simply, moving closer to examine some kind of floating display that appeared next to his bed. "Your work with radio astronomy caught our attention. Specifically, your ability to decode complex signal patterns that others deemed random noise." The mention of his work sent memories flooding back. He'd been tracking an unusual signal for months, something that seemed almost too organized to be natural, but too complex to be artificial. His colleagues had written it off as cosmic background radiation, but Marcus had been sure there was a pattern hidden in the chaos. "The signal," he said, sitting up despite his weakness. "You sent it." "Correct." Zara's expression was unreadable, but he caught something that might have been approval in those dark eyes. "It was a test. Out of your entire species, only you recognized it as communication rather than noise. That makes you valuable to us." Marcus swung his legs over the side of the bed, pleased to find his strength returning. The room was warm, and he realized he was wearing some kind of soft, light fabric instead of his usual clothes. "Valuable how? And where exactly are we?" "We are currently in orbit around your moon," Zara replied, waving her hand to make one of the walls become transparent. Marcus gasped at the sight of Earth hanging in space like a blue marble, beautiful and fragile against the star-filled darkness. "As for your value, that will become clear in time. For now, you need to recover your full strength." "You kidnapped me," Marcus said, the reality of his situation beginning to sink in. He should have been terrified, but instead he felt a strange excitement. This was the discovery of a lifetime, the thing every astronomer dreamed about. "We rescued you," Zara corrected. "Your planet is being watched by others, beings far less interested in peaceful contact than we are. Your unique abilities make you a target. Here, you are safe." Before Marcus could ask what she meant by that, an alarm began sounding throughout the ship. The lights shifted from their peaceful blue to a urgent red, and Zara's expression hardened. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, standing on unsteady legs. Zara was already moving toward the door, her fingers dancing across controls that appeared in the air. "We have been found. The hegemony has tracked us here." "The what now?" "Later," she said sharply. "Right now, we need to move." "Can you walk?" Marcus tested his legs and found them surprisingly steady. "Yeah, I think so." "Good. Follow me and do exactly as I say. Your survival depends on it." As they left the medical bay, Marcus caught glimpses of other parts of the ship through open doorways. Everything was sleek and curved, like the inside of a giant seashell. Other beings moved through the corridors. Some looked almost human, others were clearly alien. All of them seemed focused and urgent. "How many of you are there?" Marcus asked as they hurried down a corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. "On this ship?" 43 beings from 12 different species, Zara replied, without slowing down. In the collective? Millions. We are an alliance of races dedicated to scientific advancement and peaceful exploration. They passed through what looked like a busy laboratory, filled with equipment Marcus couldn't begin to understand. Scientists of various species worked at stations, their attention focused on streams of data flowing across multiple screens. The signal you sent to Earth, Marcus said, pieces beginning to fall into place. It wasn't just a test, was it? Zara glanced at him, and, for the first time since he'd awakened, she looked surprised. You are more perceptive than expected. No, it was not merely a test. It was also a message, encoded with information your species will need in the coming years. What kind of information? Before Zara could answer, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them both against the wall. Emergency lights began flashing, and Marcus could hear what sounded like weapons fire in the distance. We're under attack, Zara said, helping him to his feet. The hegemony has found us, and they will stop at nothing to claim you for themselves. Me? Why would they want me? Zara's dark eyes met his, and Marcus saw something there that might have been fear. Because, Marcus Chin of Earth, you are far more important than you realize. Your mind holds the key to something that could change the balance of power in this galaxy. And now, everyone wants to possess that key. The ship shuddered again, and Marcus realized that his quiet life as an astronomer was over. Whatever came next, there was no going back to his old world. He was part of something much bigger now, something that could determine the fate of humanity itself. The ship lurched sideways as another blast hit their hull, sending Marcus and Zara tumbling down the corridor. Emergency lighting bathed everything in harsh red as alarms wailed throughout the vessel. Marcus grabbed onto a support beam, his astronomer's mind automatically trying to calculate trajectory and force based on the ship's movement. This way, Zara shouted over the noise, pulling him toward what looked like an elevator shaft. But, instead of doors, there was just an empty tube filled with swirling energy. Do not resist the field. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Zara stepped into the energy field and vanished upward like she'd been caught in an invisible tornado. Marcus took a deep breath and followed, feeling the strange tingling sensation as the field grabbed him and pulled him through the ship's levels faster than any elevator he'd ever experienced. They emerged onto what was clearly the bridge, a vast circular room dominated by a massive view screen showing the space around Earth's moon. Marcus's breath caught as he saw their attackers for the first time. 3 massive ships, each easily 10 times the size of the vessel they were on, hung in space like metal predators. Their hulls were black as coal, covered in weapon arrays that glowed with menacing energy. Hegemony dreadnoughts, said a voice behind them. Marcus turned to see another alien, this one tall and covered in what looked like living crystal formations. They brought significant firepower for one small research ship. Captain Thex, Zara acknowledged with a nod. How long do we have? Our shields will hold for perhaps 10 more minutes. The crystal being replied, his voice like wind chimes in a storm. After that, they will board us. They clearly want the human alive, or they would have simply destroyed us already. Marcus watched the tactical display showing their ship's defensive systems struggling against the overwhelming firepower. Why are they so interested in me? I'm just a guy who looks at radio signals for a living. Captain Thex's crystal formations shifted color from blue to deep purple. Show him the decoded message, Dr. Zara. He has the right to understand what he has become part of. Zara moved to a control station that responded to her touch by creating a 3-dimensional holographic display in the air. Marcus recognized the signal pattern immediately. It was the same one he'd been tracking for months, but now he could see layers of meaning he'd never imagined. Your species calls it the WOW signal, Zara explained. But it was not from us. It was a fragment of something much older, a piece of ancient technology that has been drifting through space for millions of years. When you decoded its basic pattern, you proved your mind could interface with Forerunner technology. Forerunners. Marcus stared at the swirling patterns in the hologram, seeing mathematical relationships that seemed to shift and change even as he watched. The species that came before all of us, Captain Thex said, his crystal formations now flickering between colors. They disappeared eons ago, leaving behind artifacts that we barely understand. But some of their technology requires a specific type of neural pattern to operate, a pattern that appears to be rare in the galaxy. Another massive impact shook the ship, and Marcus could see their shields flickering on the display. "And you think I have this pattern?" "We know you do," Zara replied. "The signal fragment you decoded contains the activation sequence for a Forerunner navigation system, a system that could revolutionize space travel for any species that can use it." Marcus's mind raced as he connected the dots. "And the hegemony wants to use me to activate Forerunner technology for themselves. The hegemony believes that advanced technology belongs only to those strong enough to take it," Captain Thex explained. "They have conquered 17 species in the past century, always seeking more powerful weapons and tools. A human who can interface with Forerunner systems would make them unstoppable." The view screen suddenly filled with the image of another alien, this one clearly from one of the attacking ships. It had gray skin stretched tight over angular bones, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like molten metal. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. "Collective vessel, you will surrender the human immediately. Resistance will result in the destruction of your ship and the deaths of all aboard. You have 60 seconds to comply." Captain Thex's crystal formations blazed with angry red light. "Signal the fleet. All ships, prepare for emergency jump to Rally Point 7. "Sir," another crew member called out from a nearby station, "we cannot jump while the human is still adjusting to space travel. The neural shock could kill him." Marcus looked around at the crew working frantically at their stations, all of them risking their lives to protect him from an enemy he was just beginning to understand. These beings had saved him from Earth, brought him into their civilization, and now they were willing to die rather than let him fall into the wrong hands. "What if I go with them?" Marcus asked quietly. The bridge fell silent except for the sound of weapons hitting their shields. Zara turned to stare at him, her black eyes wide with shock. "You do not understand what you are suggesting," she said. "The hegemony does not make allies. They make tools. They would use you until you broke, then discard you, and move on to conquer your species. But if I stay here, you all die anyway," Marcus pointed out. "At least if I surrender, maybe I can find a way to escape later." 30 seconds. The hegemony commander's voice crackled from the speakers. Captain Thex moved to stand beside Marcus, his crystal formations now cycling through every color of the spectrum. "There is another option, but it is dangerous for all of us, especially you." "I'm listening." "We could attempt to jump anyway. The neural shock might not kill you. Humans have proven remarkably adaptable in our previous encounters with your species. But even if you survive, the experience will be intense." Marcus looked at the tactical display showing their shields failing and the massive enemy ships moving closer. He thought about Earth, about his quiet life at the observatory, about the signal that had started all of this. He thought about the choice between certain capture by beings who saw him as a tool, or taking a chance with beings who saw him as a person worth saving. 10 seconds. The hegemony commander announced. "Do it," Marcus said firmly. "Jump." Captain Thex's formations blazed with bright white light as he gave the order. "All ships, emergency jump. Coordinates Rally Point 7. Execute on my mark." The hegemony ships were moving to surround them now, weapon ports glowing as they prepared to fire. Marcus could see smaller vessels launching from their bays, boarding craft ready to cut through the collective ship's hull. "Mark," Captain Thex commanded. The universe twisted around them like a kaleidoscope made of stars. Marcus felt something grab hold of his consciousness and pull it through dimensions that had no name, past realities that existed only in mathematical theory. His last coherent thought before the neural shock hit was that he hoped he would still be himself when they arrived wherever they were going. Then, everything went white, and Marcus Chun learned what it truly meant to travel among the stars. Marcus woke up feeling like his brain had been put through a blender and then reassembled by someone who had never seen a brain before. Every nerve in his body felt raw and oversensitive, as if someone had turned up the volume on all his senses to 11. The medical bay around him looked the same, but something fundamental had changed. Colors seemed more vivid. Sounds carried layers of meaning he'd never noticed before, and he could swear he could feel the ship's heartbeat in the walls around him. The neural pathways are stabilizing, he heard Zara say from somewhere nearby. Remarkable. Most beings require several days to recover from their first hyperspace jump. He was unconscious for only 6 hours. Marcus tried to sit up and discovered he could feel every individual fiber in the medical bed's fabric. Did we make it? Are we safe? For now, Zara replied, appearing at his bedside with what looked like a medical scanner in her hands. We are at Rally Point 7, a hidden station in the Kepler system. The hegemony does not know of its location. As his vision cleared, Marcus could see other figures moving around the medical bay. Some he recognized from the ship, but others were clearly new arrivals. A being that looked like it was made of living metal was examining readouts on a floating screen, while something that resembled a walking tree was tending to other patients on nearby beds. Who are they? Marcus asked, nodding toward the newcomers. Refugees, Zara explained, helping him sit up slowly. Other beings the hegemony has tried to capture or conquer. Rally Point 7 is one of several hidden sanctuaries maintained by the collective. The metal being approached their bed, its surface reflecting the medical bay's lights like a mirror. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music played on steel drums. So this is the human who can interface with Forerunner technology, it said, tilting its head in a way that seemed oddly familiar despite its alien appearance. I am Engineer Keth. I have been studying Forerunner artifacts for 3 centuries, and I have never seen anyone adapt to hyperspace exposure so quickly. Adapt how? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Everything around him seemed more real somehow, as if he'd been looking at the world through dirty glass his entire life, and someone had just cleaned it. Your neural patterns have shifted, Engineer Keth explained, producing a holographic display that showed swirling patterns of light. Hyperspace exposure has unlocked latent abilities in your brain. This is what we hoped might happen, but the risk was considerable. Marcus studied the display, surprised to find that the patterns made sense to him in a way they hadn't before. It was like reading a language he'd never learned but somehow understood. These aren't just neural patterns. They're instructions. Zara and Engineer Keth exchanged glances that Marcus was beginning to recognize as the look aliens gave each other when humans did something unexpected. Most beings see neural patterns as static information, Engineer Keth said carefully. You are seeing them as dynamic code. That is a very Forerunner way of thinking. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Captain Thex entered the medical bay, his crystal formations cycling through muted blues and greens. The council has assembled. They wish to meet our human friend. Marcus stood up, pleased to find his balance had returned to normal, though everything still felt hyper-aware around him. What kind of council? The leadership of the collective, Zara explained as they walked through corridors that seemed subtly different from the ship he remembered. Representatives from all member species who help coordinate our activities. They emerged into a vast chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The room was shaped like a giant sphere, with walkways and platforms arranged at different levels around the curved walls. Beings of dozens of different species stood or floated or perched at various points, all of them focused on a central platform where Marcus found himself standing with Zara and Captain Thex. Members of the collective, Captain Thex announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I present Marcus Chun of Earth, the first human confirmed to possess Forerunner-compatible neural patterns. A being that looked like it was made of flowing liquid rose from one of the platforms. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of rain on water. We have reviewed the data from your encounter with the hegemony. They committed 3 dreadnoughts to capture 1 human. This suggests they know something about his capabilities that we do not. Marcus looked around at the assembled beings, realizing that he was probably the first human most of them had ever seen. What exactly are these capabilities? Everyone keeps telling me I'm special, but no one's explained what that actually means. The liquid being flowed closer, taking on a more solid appearance as it approached. Forerunner technology does not merely respond to neural commands. It integrates with consciousness itself, becoming part of the user's thought processes. Most beings who attempt to interface with it suffer immediate and permanent brain damage. Engineer Keth moved to a control station that materialized from the floor, creating a 3-dimensional display in the center of the chamber. We have recovered 17 Forerunner artifacts over the past millennium. Only two have ever been successfully activated, and both times the users died within minutes of making contact. But you think I might be different? Marcus asked, studying the artifacts shown in the display. They were beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly, forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the eye could process. Your species is young, said another council member, this one resembling a massive insect with iridescent wings. Your neural architecture is still flexible in ways that older species have lost through evolution. This may make you compatible with technology designed by beings who thought in ways we can no longer imagine. Marcus walked around the central display, examining the artifacts from different angles. One of them, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain swirling galaxies, called to him in a way he couldn't explain. What does this one do? The chamber fell silent. Marcus looked up to see every being in the room staring at him with something that might have been awe or terror. How did you identify the navigation nexus? Engineer Keth asked quietly. The what now? That artifact, Zara explained, her voice careful and controlled, is theorized to be a map of the entire galaxy, showing not just stellar positions, but also hyperspace currents, hidden civilizations, and the locations of other Forerunner sites. If it could be activated, it would revolutionize space travel, Marcus finished, the implications dawning on him. No wonder the hegemony wants to get their hands on me. The liquid being flowed closer. The question before this council is whether we should attempt activation, knowing the risks to your life, and the consequences if we succeed. Marcus looked around the chamber at beings who had risked everything to save him from capture, who were now offering him the choice of risking his life to help them all. He thought about Earth, alone and defenseless in a galaxy full of threats his species didn't even know existed. He thought about the hegemony, conquering civilization after civilization with superior technology. If I don't try, he said finally, the hegemony will eventually find another way to get what they want. And when they do, they'll come for Earth. Captain Thex's crystal formations blazed with approval. Then, we attempt activation. But we do it carefully, with every safeguard we can devise. As the council began discussing preparations and safety protocols, Marcus continued to stare at the navigation nexus in the display. He could feel something calling to him from within its crystalline depths, something that recognized him as much as he recognized it. Whatever happened next, he was about to find out exactly how much the universe was willing to change him, and perhaps how much he was willing to change it in return. The preparation chamber looked like something between a laboratory and a temple. Ancient Forerunner symbols covered the walls, glowing softly with their own inner light, while modern collective technology surrounded a central platform where the navigation nexus waited. Marcus stood before it in a specially designed suit that would monitor his vital signs and neural activity while protecting him from energy feedback. Remember, Engineer Keth said for the 10th time, do not try to force a connection. Forerunner technology responds to intent and understanding, not willpower. Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what that meant. The artifact was beautiful up close, about the size of a basketball, but seeming to contain infinite depth. Swirls of light moved through its crystalline structure like tiny galaxies being born and dying in fast forward. All monitoring systems are active, reported Dr. Vex, a spider-like being whose 8 arms worked independently at different control stations. Neural dampeners are standing by in case we need to break the connection quickly. Zara stood at the primary console, her black eyes reflecting the artifact's glow. Whenever you are ready, Marcus. Marcus took a deep breath and reached toward the navigation nexus. The moment his fingers made contact with its surface, the universe exploded into his consciousness. Information flooded his mind in torrents that should have driven him insane. Star charts spanning millions of years, hyperspace currents that flowed like rivers between dimensions, the locations of worlds that had been lost to time itself. But, instead of overwhelming him, the data felt like coming home. His enhanced neural patterns, changed by the hyperspace exposure, organized the information as quickly as it arrived. Neural activity is off the charts, he heard Dr. Vex saying from what seemed like a great distance. But, remarkably stable. He is not fighting the interface. Marcus could see it all now. The galaxy spread out before him like a three-dimensional map, showing not just where things were, but where they had been and where they were going. He could trace the expansion paths of different species, see the hidden trade routes used by smugglers and explorers, identify star systems that contain resources no one else knew about. But there was something else in the data stream, something that made his enhanced perception recoil in alarm. "There's something wrong," he said, his voice sounding strange in his own ears. "The hegemony, they're not just randomly conquering species." "What do you mean?" Captain Thex asked, his crystal formations shifting to alert colors. Marcus dove deeper into the navigation data, following the patterns he was beginning to understand. "They're following a specific route. Look at the species they've conquered. They're not taking the richest worlds or the strongest civilizations. They're taking specific locations that form a pattern across the galaxy." The artifact pulsed brighter as Marcus's understanding deepened. Through its ancient memory, he could see the strategic importance of each world the hegemony had claimed. "They're building a network," he continued, his consciousness now fully integrated with the Forerunner technology. "Each conquered world controls a major hyperspace junction. If they complete the pattern, they could control all travel between star systems." Zara finished, horror in her voice. The entire galaxy would be at their mercy. Marcus felt the navigation nexus respond to his growing urgency, revealing deeper layers of information. He could see hegemony forces moving even now, fleets positioning themselves for the next phase of their conquest. "There's more," he said, the words coming automatically as the artifact fed him data. "They already know about Earth. It's next on their list because our solar system sits at the intersection of 3 major hyperspace currents." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of monitoring equipment. Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of civilizations' fates pressing down on him as he processed the navigation data. "How long do we have?" Captain Thex asked. Marcus consulted the star charts flowing through his consciousness. 6 months, maybe 7. They're finishing operations in the Vegas sector first, but after that, he paused, seeing something in the data that made his enhanced perception spike with alarm. "Oh no, what is it?" Zara demanded. "They're not just coming for Earth. They're planning to use my homeworld as bait." The navigation nexus showed him fleet movements and strategic plans that chilled him to the bone. "They know about me now. They know a human can interface with Forerunner technology. So they're going to threaten my entire species to force me to activate other artifacts for them." Engineer Keth's metallic form reflected the pulsing light of the artifact. "What other artifacts?" Marcus felt his consciousness expand further into the navigation nexus's memory banks. Ancient data streams revealed themselves, showing locations scattered across the galaxy where other Forerunner technologies waited in hidden vaults and abandoned worlds. "Weapons," he said quietly. "The navigation nexus is just the beginning. There are Forerunner weapons platforms capable of destroying entire star systems. Construction technology that could build fleets in days instead of years. Even some kind of consciousness transfer system that could make their leaders immortal." The implications hit the assembled scientists and military leaders like a physical blow. If the hegemony gained access to that level of technology with Marcus as their unwilling tool, no force in the galaxy could stop them. "Then, we have to stop them first," Captain Thex declared, his crystal formations blazing with determined light. "Can you use the navigation nexus to find weaknesses in their network? Vulnerabilities we could exploit?" Marcus dove back into the data streams, his enhanced mind processing information faster than any computer the collective had ever built. The navigation nexus responded to his search, showing him fleet positions, supply lines, communication relays. "Yes," he said, excitement building as he saw the possibilities. "Their network has a fatal flaw. They've been so focused on controlling hyperspace junctions that they've created single points of failure. If we could strike at 3 specific systems simultaneously, their entire network would collapse," Zara breathed, understanding immediately. "More than that," Marcus continued, the artifact showing him deeper strategic possibilities. "We could turn their own network against them, redirect their supply lines, trap their fleets in hyperspace dead zones, maybe even cut off their command structure from their forward forces." Dr. Vex's 8 arms worked frantically at the monitoring station. Neural integration is reaching unprecedented levels. He is not just using the artifact, he is becoming part of it. Marcus felt the truth of that statement. The boundary between his consciousness and the navigation nexus was blurring, but instead of losing himself, he felt more focused than ever before. The artifact wasn't just showing him information. It was teaching him to think like a forerunner, to see patterns and possibilities that no single biological mind could process alone. I can do more than just read their star charts, he realized, his voice carrying new harmonics that resonated with the ancient technology. I can rewrite them. The chamber erupted in excited discussion as the implications became clear. With Marcus's unique interface capabilities and the navigation nexus's vast knowledge, they didn't just have intelligence on hegemony movements. They had the power to reshape the very fabric of galactic travel itself. For the first time since awakening on an alien ship, Marcus felt hope. The hegemony might be vast and powerful, but they were about to face something they had never encountered before, a human mind enhanced by Forerunner technology, backed by the collective will of free civilizations across the galaxy. The war for the future was about to begin, and humanity would not face it alone. 3 weeks after his first contact with the navigation nexus, Marcus stood in the war room of Rally Point 7, his consciousness partially merged with a dozen Forerunner artifacts simultaneously. The experience should have been overwhelming, but his enhanced neural patterns had adapted beyond anything the collective scientists thought possible. He could feel the pulse of hyperspace across the galaxy, sense ship movements through dimensions that had no name, and, most importantly, manipulate the very foundations of faster-than-light travel. Hegemony Fleet 7 has reached the Procyon system, reported Commander Vess, a reptilian being whose scaled hide shifted colors with her emotional state. Currently, those scales showed the deep red of battle readiness. They are beginning siege operations against the collective outpost there. Marcus nodded, his enhanced perception already tracking the enemy fleet through the navigation nexus's galaxy-spanning awareness. I see them. 43 ships, including 2 dreadnoughts. They're using the standard hegemony siege formation. Standard until now, Captain Thex said, his crystal formations flickering with anticipation. Show them what happens when a human rewrites the rules of space travel. Marcus smiled, feeling the ancient Forerunner technology respond to his intent. Through the navigation nexus, he reached out across hundreds of light years and touched the hyperspace currents around the Procyon system. What the hegemony didn't understand was that their ships didn't just travel through hyperspace. They depended on it for power, life support, and communication. Initiating hyperspace current reversal, Marcus announced, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated with the artifacts around him. On the strategic display, the collective forces watched in amazement as the hegemony fleet suddenly found themselves fighting against the very fabric of space itself. Their ships, designed to ride hyperspace currents like boats on a river, were now struggling against currents flowing in the opposite direction. Impossible, breathed Engineer Keth, his metallic form reflecting the data streams flowing around Marcus. You are literally rewriting the laws of physics in that region of space. Not rewriting, Marcus corrected, his consciousness diving deeper into the Forerunner systems. The laws are still the same. I'm just adjusting the local parameters. The hegemony fleet in the Procyon system was beginning to break formation as their ships lost power and maneuverability. Without the hyperspace currents to draw from, their weapons were operating at reduced capacity, and their shields were failing one by one. Phase 2. Captain Thex commanded. All strike teams, execute simultaneously. Across the galaxy, collective forces that had been positioned using intelligence from the navigation nexus struck at the 3 critical junction points Marcus had identified. These weren't just random attacks. They were surgical strikes designed to collapse the hegemony's network of controlled space routes. Marcus felt each battle through his connection to the Forerunner artifacts. In the Sirius system, collective ships appeared from hyperspace at impossible angles, using navigation routes that the navigation nexus had revealed but that no one else had ever discovered. In the Arcturus sector, an entire hegemony supply fleet found themselves trapped when Marcus shifted the hyperspace currents to create a dead zone around their position. The Vega Junction is responding, Dr. Vex reported, her 8 arms working at multiple data stations. The hegemony's communication network is beginning to fragment. But Marcus was already seeing the larger picture through his enhanced perception. The hegemony was adapting faster than expected, their command structure implementing contingency plans that showed a disturbing level of preparation. They knew this might happen, he said, concern creeping into his voice. They have backup plans, alternative routes that don't rely on the main hyperspace currents. Through the navigation nexus, Marcus watched as hegemony forces began to regroup using slower, but more reliable travel methods. Worse, their long-range sensors were actively scanning for the source of the hyperspace disruptions. They are triangulating our position, Commander Vess reported, her scales shifting to alarmed orange. Somehow, they are tracking the Forerunner technology signatures back to their source. How is that possible? Zara asked from her position at the medical monitoring station. The Forerunners designed their technology to be undetectable. Marcus felt a chill of understanding flow through his connection to the ancient artifacts. They have their own Forerunner technology, and they have someone who can use it. The strategic display suddenly flared with new contacts as a massive hegemony fleet emerged from hyperspace near Rally Point 7. At the center of the formation was a ship unlike anything in the collective's databases, a vessel that seemed to blend hegemony engineering with technology that was unmistakably Forerunner in origin. Impossible, Engineer Keth whispered. The hegemony lacks the neural patterns necessary to interface with Forerunner systems. Marcus dove deeper into the navigation nexus, searching for answers in its vast memory banks. What he found made his enhanced consciousness recoil in horror. They don't have a natural interface, he said slowly. They made one. They've been experimenting on captured beings with compatible neural patterns, forcing artificial connections to Forerunner technology. The abomination of that concept hit everyone in the war room like a physical blow. The hegemony had been torturing and mutilating other beings to create their own version of Marcus's abilities. The ship approaching us, Marcus continued, his voice tight with anger. It's controlled by what's left of someone they've turned into a living computer. They've stripped away everything that made them a person and left only the parts that can operate Forerunner systems. Captain Thex's crystal formations blazed with furious light. Then, we stopped them. Can you counter their Forerunner technology? Marcus felt the challenge through his connection to the navigation nexus. The approaching ship was powerful, its tortured pilot skilled in the use of Forerunner systems. But there was something the hegemony hadn't understood about the technology they were so desperately trying to control. They're using it wrong, Marcus realized. Forerunner technology isn't meant to be controlled through force and pain. It responds to harmony, cooperation, understanding. Their artificial interface is powerful, but it's also unstable. Can you exploit that instability? Commander Vess asked, her scales shifting to hopeful green. Marcus reached out through the navigation nexus, feeling for the tortured consciousness trapped in the approaching hegemony ship. What he found there was barely recognizable as a sentient being, just fragments of awareness held together by artificial neural implants, and driven by constant agony. Not exploit, Marcus said quietly. Heal. Before anyone could ask what he meant, Marcus extended his consciousness across space, using the navigation nexus as a conduit to touch the damaged mind controlling the hegemony ship. He didn't try to fight or override their control. Instead, he offered something the hegemony had never given their victim: peace. The effect was instantaneous. The approaching hegemony ship shuddered to a halt as its pilot, freed from the constant pain that had driven them for years, simply chose to stop. The Forerunner systems aboard the vessel, no longer forced to operate through torture and coercion, began to shut down one by one. The hegemony fleet is breaking off, Commander Vess reported in amazement. Their command ship is dead in space, and the rest are retreating. Marcus slowly withdrew his consciousness from the navigation nexus, feeling drained but oddly peaceful. Through the ancient technology, he had felt the moment when a tortured being finally found rest. It was a reminder of why they were fighting, not just to win a war, but to preserve the things that made life worth living. This is only the beginning, he said to the assembled commanders and scientists. The hegemony will adapt again, find new ways to use Forerunner technology. But now I understand something they don't. Which is? Captain Thex asked. Marcus looked around at the diverse beings who had welcomed him into their civilization, who fought not for conquest, but for the right of all species to exist freely among the stars. The Forerunners didn't disappear because they were conquered, he said. They evolved beyond the need for physical existence. And their technology isn't just about controlling space and time. It's about understanding that consciousness itself is the most powerful force in the universe. As Rally Point 7 prepared for the next phase of the war, Marcus began to realize that his journey was far from over. The hegemony might have retreated for now, but they would return with new strategies and more twisted applications of Forerunner technology. But they would face a human who was learning to think like a Forerunner, backed by civilizations that understood the true meaning of cooperation. The galaxy was about to discover what humanity could accomplish when it refused to stand alone. 6 months after the Battle of Rally Point 7, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the collective flagship Harmony, watching Earth rotate slowly in the viewport. The blue marble looked exactly as he remembered it from his awakening aboard Asteria, but everything else had changed. His consciousness now existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, interfaced with a network of Forerunner artifacts that spanned half the galaxy. He was still human, but he was also something more, a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern necessity. The evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule, Zara reported from the command center behind him. 12 million humans have agreed to voluntary relocation to collective worlds. Another 50 million have chosen to remain and help establish Earth as a fortress world. Marcus nodded, his enhanced perception monitoring the massive logistics operation taking place around his homeworld. Collective ships moved in carefully coordinated patterns, carrying volunteers to new homes among the stars, while simultaneously installing defensive systems that would make Earth one of the most protected worlds in the galaxy. And the hegemony? He asked, though he already knew the answer through his connection to the navigation nexus. Their advanced forces reached the edge of your solar system yesterday, Captain Thex replied, his crystal formations cycling through tactical assessment colors. 3 dreadnoughts, supported by 47 ships of various classes. They are maintaining position at the heliopause, apparently waiting for something. Marcus smiled, feeling the vast network of Forerunner technology responding to his amusement. The hegemony was waiting for reinforcements that would never come. Through careful manipulation of hyperspace currents over the past 6 months, Marcus had effectively isolated their forward fleets from their home territories. They could attack Earth, but they would be fighting alone, cut off from resupply and support. They still don't understand, he said, turning away from the viewport to face his allies. They think this is about controlling territory or capturing resources. They don't realize we've been fighting for something much more fundamental. The past months had been a revelation for Marcus and the collective alike. Working together with the Forerunner artifacts, they had discovered that the ancient technology wasn't just about manipulation of space and time. It was about the evolution of consciousness itself, about teaching younger species to transcend their limitations and work together across the vastness of space. The other collective species are reporting similar breakthroughs, Engineer Keth announced, his metallic form now partially integrated with Forerunner technology that allowed him to process data at incredible speeds. Beings who thought they had reached the limits of their evolution are discovering new capabilities. Our entire civilization is advancing at an unprecedented rate. That was the true genius of the Forerunner legacy, Marcus had realized. They hadn't just left behind tools and weapons for others to fight over. They had left behind a curriculum, a systematic program for uplifting younger species and teaching them to see beyond the narrow confines of their individual existence. Signal from the hegemony fleet, Commander Vess reported, her scales shifting to alert orange. They are demanding your immediate surrender and the transfer of all Forerunner artifacts to their control. Marcus felt the response forming in his enhanced consciousness before he consciously decided on it. Through the navigation nexus, he reached out across space to touch the minds of every being in the hegemony fleet. But instead of the force and coercion they expected, he offered them something else entirely, understanding. The alien commander who appeared on the main view screen was the same one who had threatened them months ago at Earth's moon. But now, instead of the arrogant certainty Marcus remembered, he could see confusion and even fear in those molten metal eyes. Human, The hegemony commander said, his voice still like grinding metal but lacking its former confidence. You will surrender yourself and return the stolen Forerunner technology. Resistance will result in the destruction of your world. Commander Zex, Marcus replied, using the name he had learned from touching the alien's consciousness. I know why you're really here. Your people are dying. The hegemony commander's forearms tensed, and Marcus could feel the shock rippling through the enemy fleet. Through the navigation nexus, he had seen the truth about the hegemony's desperate expansion. Their homeworld was slowly becoming uninhabitable, their species facing extinction unless they could find new technologies to save themselves. You have been conquering other species not out of cruelty, but out of fear, Marcus continued. Your leaders have told you that only the strong deserve to survive, that you must take what you need by force. But there is another way. Lies, Commander Zex snarled. But Marcus could feel the uncertainty in his thoughts. The weak serve the strong. This is the natural order. The Forerunners were the strongest beings this galaxy has ever known, Marcus replied, his consciousness touching the vast database of ancient knowledge. They could have conquered every species, enslaved every world. Instead, they chose to teach, to guide, to help others become more than they ever imagined possible. Through the navigation nexus, Marcus began to share images and concepts directly with every being in the hegemony fleet. Not propaganda or manipulation, but raw truth, the history of species that had faced extinction and found salvation through cooperation instead of conquest. The story of civilizations that had transcended their limitations by working together rather than fighting alone. This is the choice your people face, Marcus said as the collective fleet moved into position around Earth. You can continue down the path of conquest and watch your species die slowly in isolation. Or you can join us in something greater. Commander Zex's molten eyes flickered as he processed the information flowing through his consciousness. Around him, Marcus could feel other members of the hegemony fleet experiencing their own moments of revelation as they saw what their civilization could become if they chose cooperation over domination. You offer us alliance? Commander Zex asked slowly. After we came to destroy your world, I offer you evolution, Marcus replied, feeling the Forerunner artifacts resonating with his words. The same choice the Forerunners offered to every species they encountered. The same choice we're offering to you now. For long moments, the communication channel remained silent as the hegemony commander struggled with concepts that challenged everything his species had believed for generations. Marcus could feel the debate raging through the enemy fleet as beings who had spent their lives following orders began to think for themselves. My leaders will not accept this, Commander Zex finally said. They will call it weakness, betrayal. Then, don't tell them, Marcus suggested with a smile. Tell them you destroyed the human fleet and captured the Forerunner technology. Tell them you're establishing a long-term occupation of this system. That will give us time to show you and your people what cooperation can accomplish. Commander Zex's forearms moved in what Marcus's enhanced perception recognized as a gesture of profound respect. You would trust us with such deception? I trust you to choose what's best for your people, Marcus replied. That's what real strength looks like. The courage to admit when you've been wrong and the wisdom to choose a better path. As the hegemony fleet began to stand down, Marcus felt a deep satisfaction flow through his connection to the Forerunner network. This was what the ancient beings had intended all along, not the domination of one species over others, but the gradual evolution of consciousness throughout the galaxy. What happens now? Zara asked from beside him. Marcus looked out at Earth, now protected by shields that could withstand anything the galaxy could throw at it, surrounded by beings from dozens of species who had chosen to work together rather than fight alone. In the distance, the hegemony fleet was already beginning to integrate with collective forces, their crews eager to learn about the technologies and philosophies that had transformed their enemies into potential allies. Now we begin the real work, Marcus said, feeling his consciousness expand to touch civilizations across the galaxy. The Forerunners left us more than just artifacts and star charts. They left us a roadmap for what consciousness can become when it refuses to be limited by fear and prejudice. Through the navigation nexus, he could see the possibilities stretching out before them. A galaxy where every species had the chance to reach its full potential, where the vast distances between stars became bridges instead of barriers, where consciousness itself became the foundation for a civilization that could endure until the end of time. Marcus Chun had awakened on an alien ship 6 months ago as just another human astronomer. Now he stood at the center of a transformation that would reshape the galaxy itself. And he was no longer alone, surrounded by beings who had chosen cooperation over conquest, understanding over fear, evolution over stagnation. The Forerunners' greatest gift wasn't their technology. It was their proof that consciousness could transcend any limitation, that intelligence could overcome any obstacle, that beings who chose to work together could accomplish anything the universe had to offer. The real journey was just beginning.